Greetings, friends. This is Steve Dupiue for the Bible News Prophecy Program with Dr. Bob Thiel. Dr. Thiel, can you tell me some of what the Bible says about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, as well as Lot's wife?
Yeah, if you go to the book of Genesis, chapter 19, I want to start reading with verse 1. Bible says, "Now the two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot, who was the nephew of Abraham, was sitting in the gates of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose up to meet them, bowed himself with his face toward the ground. He said to them, 'Here now, my lords, please turn into your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise early and go your way.' And they said, 'No, we'll just spend the night out in the open square.' But he insisted strongly. So they turned to him and they entered his house. He made them a feast, and he baked them unleavened bread, and they ate. But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both old and young, and all the people from every quarter surrounded Lot's house. They called to Lot and said to him, 'Where are these men who came out to you tonight? Bring them out here that we may know them carnally.' Verse 6. So Lot went out the doorway and shut the door behind him and said, 'Please, your brethren, don't do wickedly. Do nothing to these men, since this is the reason they've come under the shadow of my roof.' And they said, 'Stand back.' And then they said, 'This one who came to stay here, he keeps acting as a judge now. We'll deal worse with you than with them.' Again, these are the men who want to get in. They pressed hard against the man Lot, and they came near to break down the door. But the men, the two angels, reached out their hands and pulled Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck the men who were at the doorway with blindness, both small and great. So they became weary of trying to find the door, even though they're blind, they're still pushing at it. So these men at Sodom were mad at Lot because he wouldn't put out his two visitors who were angels to be raped in a homosexual manner.
So there's a lot there, Dr. Thiel. But one thing that caught my ear was that Lot said, 'Only do nothing to these men, since this is the reason they have come under the shadow of my roof.' Did Lot mean when he said, 'For this reason they have come under the shadow of my roof', did Lot know what was going to happen?
I don't know if he knew, but said he was providing them protection because he suspected they'd be subject to rape otherwise.
Okay. Well, then what happened?
Genesis 19, starting verse 12. Then the angels said to Lot, 'Anyone else here? Son-in-law, your sons, daughters, whoever else in the city, take them out of this place. For we will destroy this place because the outcry against him has grown great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it.' So Lot went out and he spoke to his son-in-laws who'd married his daughters and said, 'Get up, get out of this place, for the Lord's going to destroy the city.' But his son-in-laws thought he was just joking.
Lot's son-in-laws stayed in Sodom and did not believe him.
No. Now, going back to Genesis 19, now picking up verse 15. The morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry, saying, 'Arise, take your wife, your two daughters who are there, lest you be consumed in the punishments of the city.' And while he lingered, the men took hold of his hand, his wife's hand, and the hands of his two daughters, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. So it came to pass, when they brought him outside, that he said, 'Escape for your life. Don't look behind or stay anywhere in the plain. Escape to the mountains, lest you be destroyed.' Verse 18. Then Lot said, 'Well, please, my lords, in that indeed now, if your servants found favor in your sight, you've increased mercy, which you've shown by saving my life. But can I just escape in the mountains, lest some evil overtake me and I die? So see, this city is near enough to flee to. It's a little one. Please let me escape there. Isn't it a little one, that my soul may live?' So the angel said to him, 'Okay, you found favor, so to say, and I won't overthrow this city, which you've spoken. Hurry, escape there, for I can't do anything till you arrive there.' And the name of that city was called Zoar. Verse 23. The sun had risen upon the earth when Lot entered Zoar. Then the Lord rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. So he overthrew those cities, all the plains, all the inhabitants of those cities, and what grew on the ground. But that's his Lot's wife, looked back behind them, and she became a pillar of salt." Now, those who believe the Bible know this happened. Apparently, Lot's wife looked back because she didn't sufficiently take God's warning seriously not to do it, and perhaps she longed for the area that God was destroying. Now that brought to mind something from the New Testament. 1 John chapter 2, starting in verse 15. John wrote, "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that's in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, is not of the Father, but it is of the world. And the world's passing away and the lust of it. But he who does the will of the Lord, of God, will abide forever."
So would you consider those verses to be at least one tie-in to the example of Sodom and Gomorrah for us in the end time?
Yes, Lot's wife, as well as many who profess Christianity over the centuries, have loved the world. But this present evil world, as Paul calls it in Galatians 1:4, is going to be destroyed, replaced by a better one, the coming kingdom of God. But that's not been important enough to many, including Lot's wife. Now that said, in the first century, the Jewish historian Josephus mentioned that he saw the pillar that was Lot's wife. And he wrote about that in his Antiquities of the Jews, book 1. So let me read his account. About this time, the Sodomites grew proud on account of their riches and great wealth. They became unjust toward men and impious toward God, insomuch as that they did not call to mind the advantages they received from him. They hated strangers and they abused themselves with sodomitical practices, which would be anal intercourse. God was therefore much displeased at them and determined to punish them for their pride, overthrow their city, and to lay waste their country until there would be neither plant nor fruit to grow there. God was much displeased at their impudent behavior. So he smote both those men with blindness and condemned the Sodomites to universal destruction. But Lot, upon God's informing him of the future destruction of Sodomites, went away, taking with him his wife, his daughters, and those who were betrothed to them didn't believe Lot. So God cast down a thunderbolt in the city, put it on fire, laid it waste. But Lot's wife, continually turning back to view the city as she went from it, being too nicely inquisitive what would become of it, because God had forbidden her to do so, was changed into a pillar of salt, for I have seen it, and it remains to this day.
Josephus seems to suggest that the actions of the men of Sodom toward the angels would be another reason that Sodom and Gomorrah are an example to us in this end time. Would you agree?
Oh, yes.
This may sound kind of strange, but do we know where the pillar of Lot's wife is?
Well, some have ideas. Now, Wikipedia, which discredits the biblical account, does mention two places. Under pillar of salt under Lot's wife, it says, the story appears to be based in part on a folk legend explaining a geological feature. It says there's a pillar of salt named Lot's wife. It's located near the Dead Sea at Mount Sodom and Jordan. And I'm holding this up here. And the second one is showing the tourists across the Dead Sea, which is this one, in Jordan, not far from the ruins of the Byzantine monastery of St. Lot.
So is it really possible that the author of Genesis saw some rock formation and said, wow, this is really a great story. I think I'll make one up and include it in the Bible.
No, that's absolutely absurd. The account in Genesis was not made up because of one or two geological formations. Now, instead of considering that one of those pillars may actually confirm the biblical story, Wikipedia continues to hold an anti-biblical bias on many areas. Regarding people like this, the Bible, for example, Romans 3:4 says, indeed, let God be true and every man a liar. And in 1 Timothy 6, Paul warns Timothy to guard what's committed to your trust. Avoid profane, that's secular, and idle babblings in contradiction of what's falsely called knowledge. By professing it, some have strayed concerning the faith. So we can't rely on places like that. And that's actually also prophesied. Also, Paul wrote to Timothy in 2 Timothy 3:1, so for know this, in the last days, perilous times are going to come. Verse 6, led away by various lusts, always learning and never coming to the knowledge of truth. There are evil men and impostors who grow worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. And that's what we saw. Now, that said, there are some who believe in this. In February 2024, Israel 365 News posted something related to this, which was this particular one. So what it says is, today we're visiting an unusual biblical site where truth is stranger than fiction, located in the heart of the Judean desert. Outside it was completely composed of sulfur, as opposed to the rest of the desert, which is composed of limestone. While standing at this abnormal enclave of salt, tourists immediately understand this is not a natural geological force. Indeed, the sulfur found here is unique. It's 98% pure and white, unlike natural sulfur. What happened here would remain an unexplained mystery. The Bible recording didn't say what happened. And it talks about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and that Lot's wife decided to turn around and turn into a pillar of salt. Now, whether or not that location is Lot's wife or not, Lot was turned into a pillar of salt, and we've got two possible locations that people have identified.
So is it possible that yet another lesson we are able to take from Sodom and Gomorrah in these end times is to keep our eyes focused on God and don't look back on the misery we're leaving behind?
Yes, and in the New Testament, by the way, in Jude 7, it says that Sodom and Gomorrah gave themselves up to sexual immorality and went against strange flesh, and they're set forth an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. And in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 6, Peter wrote, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah were turned into ashes, making them an example for those who would live ungodly. And so now there's another reason, by the way, to bring up Lot's wife. Now, Lot's wife, we would not have expected to be sexually immoral, but she was killed along with the others, perhaps because she condoned their behavior. But Jesus even mentioned her in Luke chapter 17, verse 26. He talks about how it was in the days of Noah, people ate and drank and all this kind of stuff, and they got destroyed. Likewise, and also in the days of Lot, they ate and drank, they bought, sold, planted, and built. But then fire and brimstone came. And then he warns in the future that there's a time to flee and not to turn back. Verse 32, Jesus says, remember Lot's wife. And whoever will seek to save their physical life is going to lose it. Lose its life will preserve it. Now, Jesus is saying destruction is coming. He mentioned other things that happened in the past. He mentioned destruction of Sodom and pointed out that Lot's wife, who could have and should have been saved, didn't heed the warnings and she perished. In fact, that Jesus mentioned Lot's wife shows that it's not some folklore. So Wikipedia is basically saying Jesus is a liar too. Anyway, Jesus' basic point was that in the end time, most Christians who are Laodiceans aren't going to heed the warnings that they should to flee when they should. And that's part of the reason why Jesus said, remember Lot's wife. Now, we all need to believe the word of God and not discount it. Lot's wife did. Don't be like her, and don't do that yourself. Because the reality is, in the end time, most Christians are Laodicean. Most Christians are not going to heed the warnings because they think that they know better or the time is not yet. Just like Sodom and Gomorrah were condemned, they had their wealth, they thought everything was fine. Jesus says the same thing to the Laodicean Christians. Now, that being said, certainly, yes, I believe that Lot's wife was turned into a pillar of salt. Yes, there's geological evidence in two places or two possible locations, one of which could be Lot's wife. We need to believe the Bible, but we also need to heed the warnings because those warnings are applicable to us now.
Thank you, Dr. Thiel. For more interviews with Dr. Thiel, in addition to written as well as audio articles, visit our website at BibleNewsProphecy.net. This is Steve Dupiue for the Bible News Prophecy Program.